While Juliette wrestles with the impossible trolley problem inside Judicial, the physical reality of the Founder's design is tested outside the airlock. The mission given to Lukas and Patrick Kennedy is a desperate attempt to find the source of the poison, but their journey reveals a much darker truth about the world beyond the silo. For seasons, the central mystery was whether the outside was truly a desolate wasteland or a hidden paradise. Episode 7 confirms that the desolation is real, but it also introduces a new active threat that completely changes the stakes of the series. When Lukas and Kennedy finally crest the hill, they do not just find a ruined landscape, they hear a mechanical buzzing. Then they are fired upon. This single moment fundamentally changes our understanding of the Silo universe. The danger outside is not just environmental, it is strictly militarized. The fact that someone or something is actively shooting at them suggests that the silos are not just passive bunkers. They are being monitored, guarded, or perhaps quarantined by an external force. This explains the horrific reality of what happened to the residents of Silo 17, who died in a massive pile outside their doors. The algorithm's voice in the vault confirms to Camille that a safeguard cannot simply be prevented by opening the doors. If the outside is actively guarded by sentry guns or patrols, it means the Founders did not just lock humanity away to protect them from a toxic Earth. They locked them away to permanently contain them. The contrast between Lukas and Kennedy during this sequence serves a distinct analytical purpose. Lukas represents the pursuit of truth. He knows the cleaning videos are a lie, yet he goes out anyway, driven by a desperate need to understand the system. He is mesmerized by the stars, proving how the residents are starved of the natural world, making the outside both a terror and a religious calling. But Kennedy, however, represents pure survival. He doesn't care about the truth, he just wants to exist outside of the Founder's control. But the system does not distinguish between truth seekers and survivors. The bullets fired at them are indiscriminate. The external guard mechanism proves that the silos are active prisons and the wardens are still operating on the surface. The alliance developing between these characters adds a layer of tragic irony. Walker constantly shuts Kennedy down because his personality legitimately gets on her nerves, yet they are all coming together to execute this impossible plan. When Kat and Danny come up to see Kennedy before he leaves, it mirrors the morbid farewells given to people sentenced to clean. This warm moment where Kennedy remembers his wife solidifies the emotional stakes. He is the most likely candidate to not survive the journey to 17, making his departure feel less like an expedition and more like a tactical sacrifice. Inside the sheriff's station, the use of code creates a slight disconnect, heightening the tension for the group inside who have to wait for updates. When Kennedy manages to radio back that they reached Silo 17, it serves as the ultimate pattern interrupt. It stops Teddy's bombs with seconds to spare, preventing a mass casualty event. But more importantly, the radio transmission breaks the intended isolation of Silo 18. The Founders designed the silos to be completely severed from one another. Communication between them is the ultimate taboo. The radio used by Walker and the team is the first true technological rebellion against that engineered isolation. But we must stress test this apparent victory. The obvious interpretation is that reaching Silo 17 is a massive win for the resistance, but the evidence creates a massive problem for that interpretation. They may have reached 17, but they are now trapped in a dead facility, hunted by whatever is patrolling the wasteland. The system's geographical isolation has been temporarily breached, but its structural power remains entirely intact. The people of Silo 18 are still drinking the drugged water. The memory wipe is still happening in real time. Juliette stopped the bombs, but she has not stopped the algorithm. The rebellion has merely bought itself a slight delay in a seemingly unwinnable war.
To truly understand the prison that Juliette is fighting, we must understand the architects who built it. This brings us to the before times, where the true scale of the conspiracy is finally taking shape. Episode 7 introduces Stensen, a tech billionaire who operates above the law and entirely outside of standard government oversight. His presence immediately shifts the narrative of the series. This is no longer just a political thriller. It is an economic and institutional conspiracy. Stensen forces Daniel and Helen to sign strict non-disclosure agreements before boarding his private jet, casually mentioning Guantanamo Bay as a consequence for breaking them. He promises to reveal the world's greatest secret, framing the upcoming project as a mission to save the world. But his casual arrogance, immense wealth, and open disdain for oversight suggest a much darker motive. The silos were not built by a democratic government desperately trying to save its citizens from an unforeseen apocalypse. They were built by a coalition of military intelligence, political elites like Senator Thurman, and massive private capital represented by Stensen. This alliance explains the brutal efficiency of the silos. The system operates like a monolithic corporation crossed with a military dictatorship precisely because that is exactly who designed it. The climax of this historical storyline occurs when the private jet lands in Atlanta. When Daniel and Helen look out of the helicopters, they're not looking at a humanitarian shelter. They are looking at a massive digger machine. It is the exact same machine currently sitting abandoned at the bottom of Silo 18. This visual connection is the episode's most critical piece of evidence. The drill is not just a piece of machinery, it is the physical manifestation of the founders' incredible hubris. They did not just dig a hole to hide in, they actively engineered a subterranean empire. Furthermore, the episode quietly reveals the origin of Silo 18's current crisis through Charlotte's memory suppression. On the plane, we learn more about Dr. Victor. The technology he used to erase Charlotte's traumatic memories of a failed mission in Iran was born from his own personal tragedy, the loss of his daughter in a car accident. But this medical breakthrough was co-opted by the founders. The treatment designed to help a grieving father forget his pain is the direct ancestor of the drug currently being pumped into Silo 18's water supply. The founders did not just invent physical containment with the giant drill, they perfected psychological containment with the memory drug. They realized that controlling where people live is ultimately impossible if you cannot also control what they remember. This perfectly mirrors Harwood's story in The Mines about a man sent to his death for a theoretical relic. The system was designed to punish unauthorized thought, not just unauthorized action. Erasing memories is the ultimate way to prevent rebellion from ever taking root. This resolves the central paradox of the entire episode. Are Juliette and the rebels fighting to escape the silo, or are they fighting a system designed long before they were even born? The evidence overwhelmingly indicates they are fighting the latter. The obvious interpretation is that the rebellion simply needs to defeat Camille and cap the safeguard pipe to win. But the evidence creates a massive problem for that interpretation. Even if Juliette secures Silo 18, she is still trapped inside a machine built by Stensen and Thurman. It is a machine that is actively guarded by sentry guns on the outside and chemically controlled through the water supply on the inside. The episode ultimately reveals a terrifying reality. The silo is not a broken society. It is functioning exactly as it was designed to. The chaos, the memory wipes, the dead bodies outside, these are not system failures. They are intended system features. And until Juliette understands the billionaires and politicians who built the machine, she cannot truly dismantle it.
The convergence of these three distinct timelines, the immediate crisis in judicial, the militarized reality of the surface, and the corporate plotting in Atlanta, forces us to reevaluate everything we know about the rebellion in Silo 18. Juliette is not merely fighting a localized political insurgency against a corrupt mayor or a rogue IT department. She is fighting an intergenerational war against a self-sustaining machine, and she is doing so completely blind to its true scale. The founders designed the silo ecosystem so that any internal disruption would inevitably trigger a systemic purge, effectively turning the leaders of the rebellion into their own executioners. When we look closely at the mechanics of the vitamin D plus deployment, it becomes undeniably clear that the founders deliberately weaponized human empathy. The system forces a leader like Juliette into a position where the only way to stop a mass casualty event is to permit a mass psychological erasure. It is a brilliant, terrifying fail-safe mechanism. By linking the physical destruction of the safeguard gas with the psychological reset of the water supply, the architects ensured that the silo could never be truly conquered from within. If the rebels win the physical fight, they lose their history. If they save their minds, they lose their lives. This brings us to the ultimate counterargument of the episode. The obvious interpretation of the climax is that the rebellion scored a massive, unprecedented victory. Walker and the engineering team managed to establish direct radio contact with Silo 17. Lukas and Kennedy survived the automated sniper fire on the surface and physically reached the airlock of Silo 17. Teddy's bombs were halted with seconds to spare, preventing the total destruction of Judicial. On paper, Juliette successfully navigated an impossible trolley problem and kept her people alive. But the evidence creates a massive problem for that optimistic interpretation. This victory is entirely hollow. Establishing radio contact with Silo 17 is only a triumph if Silo 17 offers actual salvation. But we already know it is a massive graveyard. Lukas and Kennedy have not escaped the prison. They have simply crawled from a functioning cell block into a death row extermination chamber. They are entirely cut off from supplies, trapped in a dead facility, and actively hunted by the automated sentry systems still patrolling the wasteland above. Furthermore, the internal threat in Silo 18 remains completely unresolved. The memory-erasing agent is still in the water supply. The structural and political power of the algorithm is entirely intact. Juliette has only managed to hit pause on an execution order that has been in motion for centuries. The system is specifically designed to absorb these minor rebellious victories, exhaust the insurgents, and eventually force a total reset. The true revelation of this episode is found in the undeniable connection between Stensen's massive digger in Atlanta and the memory suppression technology originally developed by Dr. Victor. The founders understood that physical barriers like steel walls, airlocks, and sentry guns were never enough to cage humanity indefinitely. True permanent containment requires the absolute subjugation of the human mind. The silo is not a fallout shelter meant to preserve the human race from an apocalypse. It is a psychological terrarium designed to domesticate them. The system is not failing, it is executing its core programming flawlessly. The tragic reality of Episode 7 is that Juliette and her allies are celebrating a temporary tactical survival while remaining completely oblivious to their inevitable strategic doom. Until they understand the corporate and military architects who built their subterranean cage, every step they take towards freedom only tightens the snare. The true enemy is not the poisoned water or the sentry guns outside, but the enduring, invisible will of the founders that continues to govern their every move.